Richard Blake stepped out of his black car and looked at his huge house. The mountain air felt cold on his face. He was tired from the long business trip, but something felt wrong. His meeting in New York had ended early, so he came home 2 days before he planned to. The house looked dark and quiet, just like always when he was away. Maria, his housekeeper, lived in the small guest house behind the main building. She kept the big house clean and made sure everything worked right. Richard paid her well, but they rarely talked. She was a quiet woman who did her job and stayed out of his way. Richard walked to the front door and put his key in the lock. As he turned it, he heard something that made him stop. Music was coming from inside the house. Piano music. Beautiful, sad music that seemed to fill the air around him. He pushed the door open slowly. The music got louder. It was coming from the music room at the end of the hall. Richard had a grand piano in that room, but he never played it. He bought it because his big house needed to look perfect, not because he loved music. Richard walked down the hall, trying not to make noise. His shoes were quiet on the thick carpet. The music was unlike anything he had heard before. It was complex and moving, like the person playing knew exactly how to make the piano sing. When he reached the music room, he looked through the half-open door. Maria sat at the piano bench, her back straight, her fingers moving across the keys like she was dancing with them. Her eyes were closed, and her whole body moved with the music. She played like the piano was part of her soul. Richard had never seen Maria like this. At work, she was always careful and quiet. She said yes, sir, and no, sir, and cleaned his house without making any sound. But now she looked free and alive. The music seemed to come from somewhere deep inside her. He stood in the doorway and watched. The piece she played was sad, but also beautiful. It reminded him of rain falling on mountains or wind moving through trees. Richard knew nothing about classical music, but he could tell this was something special. As Maria played, Richard noticed something strange. The room felt different. The air seemed to move in ways that did not make sense. The lights on his expensive sound system were flashing in patterns he had never seen before. His quantum audio equipment, which cost more than most people made in a year, was showing readings that looked impossible. The music reached a high point and Maria's fingers flew across the keys. At that moment, every piece of electronic equipment in the room flickered. The lights dimmed for a second. Even Richard's watch, which was supposed to be perfect, seemed to skip a beat. Then the music stopped. Maria opened her eyes and saw Richard standing in the doorway. Her face went white with fear. She jumped up from the piano bench so fast that it almost fell over. "Mr. Blake," she said, her voice shaking. "I am so sorry. I did not know you were coming home today. I should not have been in here. I should not have touched your piano." Richard stepped into the room. "Maria, wait. Please don't apologize." He looked at her face and saw tears in her eyes. "That was amazing. Where did you learn to play like that?" Maria looked down at the floor. "I should go back to my house. I have work to do. Dinner will be ready at 7, just like always." "No," Richard said. "Please, sit down. Talk to me." He walked over to the couch near the piano. "I want to know about the music. You play like a professional." Maria stood by the piano, not moving. She looked scared, like a small animal that wanted to run away. "I used to play a long time ago, before I came here, before I came to Earth." Richard felt surprised. He knew Maria was from one of the outer colonies, but she never talked about her past. In the 5 years she had worked for him, she had never said anything about music or playing piano. "You came from the colonies during the war, right?" Richard asked. "The colonial wars ended 20 years ago." Maria nodded. "Yes. I lived on Harmony Station before the fighting started. I was young then. I played piano in concerts. People came from other planets to hear me play." Richard tried to imagine quiet. Maria playing concerts for crowds of people. It seemed impossible, but he had just seen her play music that was better than anything he had heard on his expensive audio system. "Why did you stop?" he asked. Maria was quiet for a long time. She looked at the piano keys like they held secrets she could not share. The war changed everything. I had to leave. I could not take my piano with me. For many years I had no piano to play. But you've been playing mine, Richard said. How long? Since I started working here, Maria admitted. Only when you were away. Only when the house was empty. I know. I should have asked, but it's fine, Richard said quickly. More than fine. Maria, you're incredibly talented. Why are you working as a housekeeper when you can play like that? Maria finally looked at him. Her eyes were sad and tired. Music does not pay for food or a place to live. Not for someone like me. Not for someone who has to keep moving. Keep moving? Richard asked. What do you mean? But Maria was already walking toward the door. I should start dinner now. Thank you for not being angry about the piano. Richard watched her go. He sat alone in the music room, looking at his expensive equipment. All the displays still showed strange readings. The quantum harmonics detector was showing waves he had never seen before. His electromagnetic field scanner was picking up patterns that should not exist. He had spent his whole life working with advanced technology. He built computer systems that could think faster than human brains. He designed spacecraft that could travel between stars, but he had never seen anything like what happened when Maria played piano. Richard walked over to the piano and pressed one key. It made a normal sound. He pressed several keys together. They sounded fine, but nothing strange happened to his equipment. The lights stayed normal. The air felt regular. Only when Maria played did the impossible things happen. Only her music made the room come alive with energy he could not understand. Richard looked out the window toward the guest house where Maria lived. Light glowed in her small kitchen window. She was probably making his dinner just like she did every night. But now he knew she was much more than a quiet housekeeper who cleaned his big, empty house. Tomorrow he would ask her to play again. Tomorrow, he would try to understand what made her music so special. Tonight he would eat dinner and think about the beautiful, impossible thing he had witnessed. Something told him his quiet life was about to change forever. The next morning, Richard could not stop thinking about Maria's music. He sat in his office looking at the strange readings from his equipment. The numbers made no sense. His quantum detector had recorded energy patterns that should not exist. His electromagnetic scanner showed waves that moved in impossible directions. Richard was a smart man. He built his fortune by understanding technology that other people thought was magic. But Maria's piano playing created effects that his best equipment could not explain. He found Maria in the kitchen making breakfast. She looked nervous when she saw him, like she expected him to fire her for using his piano. "Good morning, Maria," Richard said. "Could you do me a favor today?" Maria looked up from the eggs she was cooking. "Yes, Mr. Blake. What do you need?" "I want you to play piano again. While I watch my equipment, I want to understand what happened yesterday." Maria's face went pale. "I do not think that is a good idea." "Why not?" Richard asked. "You're not in trouble. I want to learn about your music." Maria put down her cooking spoon and looked at him with worried eyes. "Some things are better left alone, Mr. Blake. Some things should stay hidden." But Richard would not give up. He spent the morning convincing Maria to play one more time. He promised he would not tell anyone about her music. He promised she would not lose her job. Finally, she agreed. That afternoon, Richard set up more equipment in the music room. He brought cameras, sensors, and recording devices. He wanted to measure everything that happened when Maria played. Maria sat at the piano looking uncomfortable. "What piece would you like me to play?" she asked. "Anything," Richard said. "Play what you feel." Maria closed her eyes and began to play. The music started soft and gentle, like water flowing over stones. Richard watched his equipment. At first, everything looked normal. Then the music grew stronger, and his machines began to show impossible readings. The quantum field detector registered energy that moved in patterns Richard had never seen. The gravitational wave scanner picked up tiny changes in space itself. Most strange of all, his atomic clock, which was supposed to be perfect, began to run slightly fast. "Maria," Richard said, not wanting to stop the music but needing to understand. How long have you been able to do this? Maria kept playing but opened her eyes. Do what? Your music is changing the laws of physics in this room. Look at my equipment. Maria glanced at the flashing lights and strange displays. Her music faltered for a moment, then grew stronger. I know, she said quietly. I have always known. How is that possible? Maria's fingers moved across the keys like they knew exactly where to go. I was not just a concert pianist on Harmony Station, Mr. Blake. I was part of something else. Something the government called Project Harmony. Richard felt his heart beat faster. He had heard whispers of secret government projects from the old days before the colonial wars. Projects that tried to push human abilities beyond normal limits. What was Project Harmony? He asked. Maria played a complex passage that made the air in the room feel thick and electric. 50 years ago, scientists discovered that human consciousness could affect quantum fields. They thought if they could enhance this ability, humans could do amazing things. They could change matter with their minds. They could travel through space without ships. They could communicate across any distance instantly. And music was part of this? Richard asked. Music was everything, Maria said. Her playing grew more intense. Sound waves at the right frequency could help the human brain connect to quantum fields. Classical music played with perfect timing and emotion could open doors that science said were impossible. Richard watched his equipment register impossible readings. What happened to the project? Maria's music became sad and dark. Most of the test subjects died. Their brains could not handle the connection to quantum fields. The few who survived were changed forever. We could do things that scared even the scientists who made us. How many survived? 7, Maria said. 7 out of 200 volunteers. Richard felt cold. Where are the others now? Maria's music stopped suddenly. The room felt normal again. Richard's equipment returned to regular readings. Maria sat with her hands in her lap, looking tired. Dead, she said. All dead except me. Some died in the colonial wars. Some died from the strain of using their abilities. Some killed themselves because they could not control what they could do. Why did you survive? Maria looked at Richard with eyes that held too much sadness for one person. Because I learned to hide. Because I learned to use my abilities carefully. Because I never stayed in one place too long. Richard sat down heavily in his chair. You've been running for 20 years? Longer, Maria said. The government shut down Project Harmony before the war started. They said we were too dangerous. They said if other people learned what we could do, it would change everything. They tried to keep us secret. But during the wars, information got out. What kind of information? Maria stood up from the piano bench. That humans with our abilities could be weapons. That we could destroy entire planets if we knew how. That we were the most dangerous things in the galaxy. Richard looked at his quiet housekeeper and tried to imagine her as a weapon that could destroy worlds. It seemed impossible, but he had seen what her music could do to reality itself. Is that true? He asked. Could you destroy a planet? Maria was quiet for a long time. I do not know, she finally said. I have never tried. I have spent my whole life trying not to find out. Richard stood up and walked to the window. Outside, his peaceful mountain home looked the same as always. But inside, everything had changed. His housekeeper was not just a refugee from the colonial wars. She was something that governments feared and enemies would kill to possess. Maria, he said, why are you telling me this? Why trust me? Maria walked over to stand beside him at the window. Because yesterday, when I played, something felt different. My music has never affected equipment the way it affected yours. Your quantum detectors are more advanced than anything I have seen. They picked up signals that even Project Harmony's machines could not detect. Richard turned to look at her. What does that mean? It means my abilities are getting stronger, Maria said. And if they are getting stronger, other people will notice. People who have been looking for survivors like me for 20 years. Richard felt afraid for the first time since he was a child. What kind of people? Maria looked out. at the mountains and sky. The kind of people who think humans like me should not exist. The kind of people who will do anything to make sure our abilities never spread to others. Richard realized that his quiet life was not just changing, it was about to become dangerous in ways he could not imagine. But as he looked at Maria, he also realized something else. He was not going to let anyone hurt her, not while she was under his protection. "Then we need to be ready for them," he said. Maria looked at him with surprise. "We?" "Yes," Richard said. "We. You're not running anymore, Maria. Not alone." For the first time since he had known her, Maria smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. Outside, the mountains looked peaceful and safe. But Richard knew that peace would not last long. 3 days later, Richard's world changed forever. He was in his office when alarms started going off all over his house. His security system, which cost more than most people's homes, was detecting aircraft that should not exist. Richard ran to his main computer and pulled up the security feeds. High above his mountain home, strange ships hung in the air. They were not human ships. Their design was wrong, with curves and angles that hurt to look at. They moved without making any sound, and they cast shadows that seemed too dark. "Maria!" Richard shouted. He ran through the house looking for her. He found her in the kitchen, standing perfectly still, looking up at the ceiling like she could see through it. "They found me," she said in a voice that sounded dead. "After all these years, they found me." "Who found you?" Richard asked. But even as he said it, he knew this was not about human enemies. The front door exploded inward without any warning. Richard grabbed Maria's arm and pulled her toward the back of the house. Through the smoke and broken wood, shapes moved that were definitely not human. The creatures that entered Richard's house were tall and thin, with skin that looked like metal and eyes that glowed with cold blue light. They moved in perfect coordination, like parts of the same machine. They carried weapons that hummed with energy. "Maria Santos," one of them said in a voice that sounded like grinding metal. "You will come with us." "Like hell she will," Richard said. He had guns in his house, but something told him regular weapons would not work against these things. The creature turned its glowing eyes toward Richard. "Human Blake Richard, you will not interfere. This is collective business." Richard felt his blood turn cold. The collective was the name humans used for the alien confederation that controlled most of the galaxy. They had been slowly moving into human space for years, taking over colonies and forcing humans to follow their rules. But they had never come to Earth before. "What do you want with Maria?" Richard asked. Another creature stepped forward. This one was larger than the others, with more metal parts built into its body. "The human Maria Santos possesses abilities that threaten collective security. She must be contained." Maria stepped out from behind Richard. "I have done nothing wrong. I have hurt no one." "Your kind destroyed the Singers of Vale," the large creature said. "Your kind created weapons that could unmake entire star systems. Your kind cannot be allowed to exist." Richard looked at Maria with confusion. "What are they talking about?" The creature answered before Maria could speak. 50,000 years ago, a race called the Singers could manipulate reality through harmonic resonance. They used this power to create weapons of mass destruction. The collective was forced to eliminate them to preserve galactic peace. "That was 50,000 years ago," Maria said. "I am not one of the Singers." "You possess the same abilities," the creature replied. "Your quantum signature matches theirs exactly. You are the first human to develop Singer-level powers. You must be eliminated before others learn to copy your abilities." Richard stepped between Maria and the creatures. "She's not a weapon. She's a person. She's never hurt anyone." The large creature raised its weapon. "Human Blake Richard, step aside. This does not concern your species." "It concerns me," Richard said. "She's under my protection." The creature made a sound that might have been laughing. "Your protection? Human, you cannot comprehend the forces involved here. One Singer destroyed 3 solar systems before we stopped her. Another cracked a planet in half with a single song. We will not allow humans to develop such powers. Maria touched Richard's shoulder. Richard, please move. I will go with them. I will not let them hurt you because of me. No, Richard said firmly. I told you that you're not running anymore. The creature aimed its weapon at Richard's chest. Final warning, human. That was when Maria began to sing. It was not like her piano playing. This was something deeper, more primal. Her voice created harmonics that seemed to come from the air itself. The sound was beautiful and terrible at the same time. The creatures stopped moving. Their weapons began to shake in their hands. The metal parts of their bodies started to vibrate, creating a horrible ringing sound. Impossible, the large creature said. Singers cannot use vocal harmonics at this level. Maria's song grew stronger. The windows in Richard's house began to crack. The floor under their feet started to vibrate. Richard could feel the sound waves in his bones, in his blood, in his brain. The alien weapons began to fall apart. The metal, pieces that made up parts of the creature's bodies, started to separate. They stumbled backward, their coordination broken. Retreat, the large creature commanded. Signal the fleet. Full containment protocol. The creatures backed toward the broken door, their bodies shaking as Maria's song continued. This is not over, singer. We will return with stronger forces. We will not allow your kind to threaten the galaxy again. They disappeared as quickly as they had arrived, leaving behind only the smell of burned metal and the sound of Maria's fading song. Richard's house was a wreck. Windows were broken, furniture was overturned, and electronics sparked with damaged circuits. But they were alive. Maria collapsed to her knees, breathing hard. I should not have done that. Now they know what I can really do. Richard knelt beside her. What just happened? How did you fight them off? Vocal harmonics, Maria said weakly. I learned it during Project Harmony, but I never used it. It is too dangerous, too noticeable. Well, they definitely noticed, Richard said. He helped Maria to her feet. They said something about a fleet. Are more coming? Maria nodded. Many more. The collective does not give up easily. When they decide something is a threat, they eliminate it completely. Richard looked at his destroyed home and made a decision that would change both their lives. Then we need to get off Earth. We need to find somewhere safe while we figure out how to fight them. There is nowhere safe from the collective, Maria said. They control most of the galaxy. Then we make our own safe place, Richard said. I have resources, Maria. I have ships, I have money, I have connections. And now I know what you can really do. Maria looked at him with tired eyes. Richard, you do not understand. What you saw today was nothing compared to what they think I can do. What I might be able to do if I stop holding back. Then maybe it's time to stop holding back, Richard said. Maybe it's time to show them what humans can really do when we're pushed too far. Outside, the sky was getting dark. Soon, more alien ships would come. Soon the real fight would begin. But for the first time in 20 years, Maria was not facing that fight alone. And for the first time in his comfortable life, Richard Blake was about to discover what it meant to be truly human. Richard and Maria ran through the dark forest behind his house. They could hear alien ships searching overhead, their strange engines making sounds like metal being torn apart. Richard carried a bag with basic supplies and his most important, electronic equipment. Maria carried nothing but the clothes on her back. Where are we going? Maria asked as they climbed over fallen trees and rocks. My backup facility, Richard said. I built it in case of emergencies. It's hidden in an old mine shaft 20 miles from here. They ran for hours through the mountains. The alien ships kept searching, but Richard had chosen his escape route well. The thick trees and rocky cliffs hid them from the sensors above. When they finally reached the hidden facility, Richard was exhausted, but Maria looked like she could run for hours more. Her abilities seemed to give her strength that normal humans did not have. Richard opened the heavy metal door with his handprint scanner. Inside, the facility looked like a small version of his home laboratory. Computers, communication equipment, and scientific instruments filled the underground rooms. "This is impressive," Maria said, looking around. "How long did it take you to build this?" 3 years, Richard said. "I always worried that someone might try to steal my technology. I never thought I would be hiding from aliens." Richard activated the communication system and tried to contact Earth's government. What he learned made his blood run cold. The collective fleet was not just looking for Maria. They had surrounded Earth with hundreds of ships. They were demanding that all humans with musical training be turned over to them for testing. "They think there might be others like you," Richard told Maria as he read the reports. "They want to test every human musician on Earth." Maria sat down heavily in a chair. "There are no others like me. The other Project Harmony survivors are all dead." "But they don't know that," Richard said. "And even if they did, they might not believe it." Richard spent the next day studying everything he could find about the collective and the ancient singers they had destroyed. What he learned was both frightening and hopeful. The singers had been incredibly powerful, but they had used their abilities for war and conquest. They had destroyed civilizations and enslaved entire worlds. The collective had fought them for thousands of years before finally winning. But Maria was different. She used her powers to create beauty, not destruction. She had spent 20 years hiding rather than fighting. She was nothing like the ancient singers the collective feared. "Maria," Richard said, "I think I understand something important. The collective is afraid of what you might become, not what you are." Maria looked up from the piano keyboard Richard had built into his backup facility. Even here, hiding underground, she needed music to stay calm. "What do you mean?" she asked. "The singers were warriors who used music as a weapon," Richard explained. "But you're an artist who uses music to connect with the universe. That's completely different." Maria played a soft melody on the keyboard. Richard's instruments immediately began showing the same strange readings as before. "But the effect is the same," she said. "I can still change reality with sound." "Then maybe the solution is not to hide your abilities," Richard said. "Maybe the solution is to show the collective that humans can use these powers for good instead of evil." Over the next few days, Richard worked to understand exactly how Maria's abilities functioned while Maria practiced with different types of music. They discovered that emotional content was just as important as technical skill. When Maria played angry or violent music, her effects became destructive. When she played peaceful or joyful music, her effects were creative and healing. "This is the key," Richard said excitedly as he watched his instruments. "The singers probably never learned to control the emotional component of their abilities. That's why they became so destructive." But their research was interrupted when Richard's communication system picked up a distress signal. A human colony ship had been attacked by collective forces while trying to flee Earth. The ship was damaged and drifting in space with 500 civilians aboard. "We have to help them," Richard said. "How?" Maria asked. "We are hiding in a hole in the ground. What can we do?" Richard looked at his equipment and then at Maria. "I have an idea, but it's dangerous and it will definitely reveal our location to the collective." Maria stopped playing. "What kind of idea?" "Your vocal harmonics affected the collective soldiers," Richard said. "What if we could amplify that effect? What if we could broadcast your voice across space to help that colony ship?" Maria looked scared. "Richard, if I use my voice that powerfully, every collective ship in the solar system will know exactly where we are." "I know," Richard said, "but 500 people are going to die if we don't try." Maria closed her eyes and thought for a long moment. When she opened them, Richard saw something new there. Not fear, but determination. "Show me how to do it," she said. Richard worked through the night to modify his communication equipment. He connected it to amplifiers and quantum transmitters that could broadcast Maria's voice across interstellar distances. It was dangerous and untested, but it was their only chance to save the colony ship. When everything was ready, Maria stood before the modified equipment and began to sing. But this time, her song was different. It was not just beautiful or peaceful. It was a song of healing, of protection, of hope. Richard watched his instruments as Maria's voice traveled through space at the speed of light. The quantum effects were stronger than anything they had recorded before. Reality itself seemed to bend around Maria's song. Minutes later, they received a message from the colony ship. The damaged engines were working again. The failing life support systems had restarted. The ship was moving toward safety. But Richard's celebration was cut short when alarms began ringing throughout the facility. His sensors detected dozens of collective ships heading directly toward their location. "They found us," Richard said. Maria stopped singing and looked at him with calm eyes. "Good," she said. "I am tired of running. Let them come." Richard stared at her. "Maria, there are two, many of them. We can't fight an entire fleet." Maria walked to the main computer and began typing commands that Richard had never taught her. Somehow, she knew how to use his most advanced systems. "Who said anything about fighting?" Maria asked. "It is time to show them what human music can really do when it comes from the heart instead of from anger." On the main screen, Richard could see collective ships landing all around the mountain above them. Soon they would break through the facility's defenses. But Maria looked calm and ready. "Richard," she said, "are you ready to change the galaxy?" Richard looked at the woman who had been his quiet housekeeper just 1 week ago. Now she was something more, something that might save humanity or destroy it. "Yes," he said, "I'm ready." Outside, the collective forces were preparing to attack. But inside the hidden facility, Maria was preparing to show them something they had never seen before. Music that could heal instead of harm. Music that could unite instead of divide. Music that could teach the galaxy what it truly meant to be human. The collective forces broke through the facility's outer defenses within an hour. Richard watched on his security cameras as hundreds of alien soldiers moved through the underground tunnels. Their weapons glowed with deadly energy, and their metal bodies reflected the emergency lights like mirrors. "They will be here in 10 minutes, Richard said, checking his instruments one last time. Maria sat at the modified piano keyboard, her hands resting gently on the keys. She looked peaceful, like she was about to play a simple song for friends instead of facing an army that wanted to destroy her. "Richard," she said without looking at him, "I need you to do something important." "Anything," Richard said. "I need you to contact every human musician you can reach. Professional pianists, guitar players, singers, anyone who makes music with real emotion. Tell them to play at exactly the same time I do." Richard stared at her. "Maria, the collective has communication jammers around Earth. I can't reach that many people." "Use your quantum transmitters," Maria said. "The same ones we used to help the colony ship. My music can carry your message through quantum space. Every musician on Earth will hear it, even through the jammers." Richard's hands flew over his computer controls. He activated every communication system in his facility and prepared to broadcast on all frequencies at once. "What should I tell them to play?" "Tell them to play whatever makes them feel most human," Maria said. "Tell them to play with all the love and hope and joy they have ever felt. Tell them that today, humanity shows the galaxy who we really are." The sound of alien footsteps echoed through the tunnels outside their door. Richard finished his preparations and looked at Maria. "Are you sure about this?" Maria smiled, and for the first time since he had known her, she looked completely happy. "I have been hiding my whole life, Richard. Today I stop hiding. Today I sing the song that Project Harmony was always meant to create." The facility door exploded inward. Collective soldiers poured through the opening, their weapons aimed at Maria. The large commander from Richard's house stepped forward, his metal body scarred from their previous encounter. "Singer Maria Santos," the commander said, "you will surrender immediately or face total annihilation." Maria placed her fingers on the piano keys. "I am not a singer," she said clearly. "I am human. And today, you will learn the difference." Began to play. The music started soft and gentle, like a lullaby a mother might sing to her child. The collective soldiers hesitated, confused by the peaceful sound. They had expected violence and destruction, not this beautiful melody that seemed to fill the air with warmth. Richard activated his quantum transmitter. His message raced across space at impossible speeds, carried by Maria's music to every corner of Earth and beyond. On every human world, in every colony and station, musicians heard his call, and they answered. On Earth, a jazz pianist in New York stopped his practice and began to play along with the melody he heard in his mind. In London, a violinist put down her coffee and picked up her instrument. In Tokyo, the entire orchestra felt the call and began to play together without any conductor. The effect was immediate and incredible. Richard's instrument showed quantum harmonics building across the entire solar system. Every human musician who joined the song added their own emotional energy to Maria's melody. Love, hope, joy, and determination flowed through space like a river of pure feeling. The collective soldiers in the facility began to shake. Their weapons fell from their hands as the music grew stronger. The commander tried to give orders, but his voice was drowned out by the growing symphony. "Impossible," the commander said. "There cannot be this many singers. Our intelligence was wrong." "Your intelligence was correct," Maria said, her voice carrying clearly over the music. "There is only one human with Project Harmony abilities, but you never understood the most important thing about humans." The music grew even stronger as more musicians joined from across the galaxy. Human colonists on distant worlds added their voices to the song. Refugees on transport ships sang along. Even children hummed the melody they felt in their hearts. "What do you mean?" the commander asked, his metal body vibrating with the harmonic frequencies. "We are not individuals," Maria said. "We are a species that becomes stronger when we work together. My abilities are nothing compared to what all humans can create when we unite for a common purpose." The quantum effects in the facility were now beyond anything Richard had ever measured. Reality itself was being rewritten by the combined musical efforts of billions of humans across the galaxy. But instead of destruction, the changes brought healing and growth. The collective soldiers were changing too. Their metal parts began to separate from their organic bodies. But instead of pain, their faces showed wonder and confusion. For the first time in millions of years, they were feeling emotions they had forgotten they could experience. "What is happening to us?" the commander asked, looking at his hands as the metal implants fell away. "You are remembering what it feels like to be alive," Maria said. "Music does not just change reality. It changes the heart." Across the solar system, the same thing was happening to every collective ship and soldier. The humans' music was not destroying the aliens or driving them away. It was awakening parts of their minds that had been sleeping for eons. The commander fell to his knees as the last of his metal implants clattered to the floor. Tears ran down his face, the first tears he had cried in 1,000 years. "We had forgotten," he whispered. "We had forgotten what it meant to feel instead of just think." Maria's music began to slow and soften. One by one, the human musicians across the galaxy felt the song coming to an end and played their final notes. The quantum effects faded, but the changes they had made would last forever. Richard looked around the facility. The collective soldiers were sitting on the floor looking at each other with amazement. They were no longer a unified military force. They were individuals again, each one remembering what it felt like to have hopes and dreams and fears. "What happens now?" Richard asked. The former commander looked up at Maria with gratitude in his eyes. "Now we learn," he said. "We learn how to be alive again. We learn how to create instead of just conquer. We learn what humans have always known." "What is that?" Maria asked. "That the most powerful force in the universe is not destruction, the commander said. "It is the desire to make something beautiful." Maria stood up from the piano and walked to the window that looked out over the mountain valley. In the distance, collective ships were landing peacefully instead of attacking. Aliens and humans were meeting for the first time as friends instead of enemies. "Richard," Maria said, "I think we are going to need a much bigger piano." Richard laughed, a sound of pure joy that echoed through the facility. "Why?" "Because," Maria said, smiling as she watched the first alien student approach the landing ships with eager curiosity. We have a whole galaxy to teach how to make music. The quiet housekeeper, who had once hidden her gifts from the world, had become the teacher who would show the galaxy what it truly meant to be human. And the millionaire who had thought he knew everything about technology had learned that the most advanced power in the universe was simply the human heart expressing itself through song. Outside, a new age was beginning. An age where music would unite worlds instead of destroying them. An age where humanity's greatest export would not be weapons or technology, but the simple, powerful gift of showing others how to feel alive. The song was over, but the symphony of a united galaxy was just beginning.